Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dominika Fortuna, and firstly, I would like to ask you a simple question. When there are hard times in your life, and when everything is falling apart, have you tried not being sad? Yeah, just like that. Please have that question in mind, because tonight we'll be considering if asking these questions is even relevant to ask. But before we start that, let's start, again, with a little thought experiment. Imagine you were invited to celebrate your friend's 10th wedding anniversary, and you were asked to give a toast. But on the day of the event, you got sick, and you had to cancel. And when you called to cancel, would you prefer to say that you couldn't come because you had sprained your ankle, or that you had a panic attack? And I feel that we all know what the answer is. So let's think, why is that? What makes an ankle better then? Is it because having a panic attack is something shameful? Is it humiliating? Is it a sign of failure even? And answering those questions 3 times over, no, it is not. It is perceived as such because we, as a society, made it to be. Being so critical about mental illnesses has turned them into a stigma, which literally means dishonor or a disgrace. As the research shows, the number of people afflicted of mental illnesses is going to increase. It's only increasing. And it does not work. So, let's help. Okay. So the most important indicator of prevalence and impact is, as you can see, the global burden of disease. And it is the impact of health problems measured by indicators such as morbidity, mortality, and financial costs. It is measured in something called DALY, and DALY stands for Disability Adjusted Life Years. And one DALY represents the equivalent of loss of 1 year in a full health. And here we have, this table shows the latest report of the World Health Organization. As you can see here, the unipolar depressive disorder, which is commonly called major depression, which was the 3rd leading cause in 2004, is predicted to outrank all the others by 2030. This is marvelous, even the ischemic heart disease. And to my knowledge, sadly, the WHO stated that this year, I suppose in March, those predictions actually came true. So there's something to think about. To better even illustrate the problem, let's take a look at the costs. According to WHO and World Economic Forum, mental illnesses represent the biggest economic burden worldwide, costing, pay attention, $2.5 trillion in 2010. And this cost is projected to be $6 trillion by 2030. And I must say, those are astonishing numbers, aren't they? But the problem is not the number, but the manner in which mental health problems affect one's life. The question is if those people can control their illness and if they have chosen their own fate. But those are just statistics. What does it look like from a personal perspective? To be honest, stigmatizing is actually nothing new. It is a mechanism as old as mankind, and it is always the same. Maybe right now we do not have visible signs. We do not force people to wear a band with a yellow star on it. Or we do not mark women with scarlet A on their chest to mark their sexual immoral behavior. Just remember what happened to Hester Prynne in Scarlet Letter. Neither do we mark runaway slaves. but does it mean we don't have our own way to exclude people that we don't want in our society? Oh yes, we can. We have. And there are a lot of misconceptions and myths about mental health and mental illnesses, but they can be narrowed down to three main themes, which are fear and exclusion. It's thought that people with severe mental illnesses should be feared and therefore be kept out of most communities. The second one is authoritarianism. It is thought that people with severe mental illnesses are irresponsible, so life decisions should be made by others. And the third one is benevolence. It is thought that people with severe mental illnesses are childlike and need to be cared for. When you think about it, those themes actually suit really well when we think about conditions like schizophrenia or bipolar affective disorder. What's interesting, we people tend to believe that some illnesses are better than others. We deny the importance of some of them. When we think about depression or social anxiety, here matters take a slightly different turn, because those are often perceived as an indulgence, a sign of weakness. It is thought that a person is simply lazy, is moody, or is looking for excuses. And to think about it, it's really absurd how we feel. When we think about depression, the problem is we've all had various experiences in our lives, and that is the main problem when it comes to thinking about depression. Through those experiences, we believe we know what other people go through. So when we hear someone talking about major depression, it's easy to say, oh, you know, I've had a bad day in my life, I know what it's like. The problem is, to compare a bad day to major depression is like to compare a paper cut to an amputation. And to give you a better idea of what I'm talking about, let's see how it would be if we talked about physical health the way we talked about mental health. Please imagine those situations. Someone accidentally cuts himself with a knife when cutting something. Would you say, you know what? A lot of people have it way worse than you do. You just gotta chill out. When someone has hurt his leg and says, wow, I think I actually sprained it this time. I need to see my physical therapist. Would you ask, you go to therapy? Okay, whatever. See? When someone with diabetes is taking an insulin shot, would you advise, you're taking another insulin shot? Have you ever thought about dropping the pharmaceuticals and fighting it the natural way? And when someone has a flu, would you ask, have you tried? No. Not having a flu? Those types of reactions are commonly encountered by people suffering from mental illnesses. So let's go back to the question from the beginning. Have you tried not being sad? And you clearly see how absurd it is. It's all in your head way of thinking falls into the same category. It deprives the disease of its gravity. But paradoxically, when you think about it, it is all in your head, but not in the way you may think. What I'm basically saying is mental illnesses or psychological injury, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, the PTSD for short, can affect the structure and the activity of the brain. For example, the effects of PTSD on a brain are increased size of amygdala, which is the orange part right there, shrunk hippocampus, which is the blue part, and shrunk medial prefrontal cortex, which is more or less right here. Amygdala is responsible for emotional regulation, hippocampus for memory functions, and prefrontal cortex for cognitive control of behavior. So that is why people with PTSD find it difficult to control their emotions, have memory distortions, or constantly experience nightmares or flashbacks. There are also differences in the activity of the brain. Let's take a look to the second scan. the activity of the brain of the depressed person is significantly lower than of a healthy one. Or taking obsessive compulsive disorder under consideration. The abnormalities are mostly found in the area of a frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making, judgment, and error detection. So it's really easy to see how those abnormalities, how such increased activity in this area can lead to obsessive compulsive behavior. To conclude, to understand that the brain is an organ that can malfunction just like any other organ. And mental illnesses are illnesses of that specific organ. Telling someone, you're not really sick, it's just all in your head. It's like telling someone with asthma, you're not really sick, it's just all in your lungs. So please remember, just because something is not visible, it doesn't mean it's not really there. Thank you and have a lovely evening.